The original Fallout 3, codenamed Van Buren, was lost in a library fire in 1917. The malicious entity calling itself Tothwart, known as the Great Serpent of Discord to the Comanches and the Snake of Deceitful Change to the Dawn Host, stole the shape of Fallout 3, replacing it with its own creation. The betrayal tore a hole in the fabric of reality, allowing various microplastics to enter our universe. Listen to me, no matter what, do not look the creature in the eye. Fallout Yesterday is a project dedicated to resurrecting the game using the Fallout 2 engine based on the surviving and very detailed documentation. Unfortunately, just about everything that could have gone wrong with Fallout Yesterday did. Despite the project being older than many of the people watching this, very little progress was made. Mapping, characters, even audio was the worst in class. The game reuses assets from other Fallout fan games with mismatched styles and color palettes. I had no idea classic Fallout could look this awful, but the most baffling choice was the yellowish screen filter, which was so harsh on the eyes that after a minute the game becomes physically painful to look at. You thought Underrail was hardcore. You thought the Age of Decadence was unfair. This thing is trying to blind you in real life. So it seems unsalvageable. But maybe there is hope. A month ago or so, I downloaded the most recent version of the game, and for the first time in this project's long history, things might be going in the right direction, and the toxic screen filter was gone. Could it be? Perhaps Van Buren is not lost to us after all. The mission of this video is to break down Fallout Yesterday scene by scene, is to identify what's wrong with it and figure out how to fix it. And we'll also be reading the original Van Buren design documents. Yes, there will be some banter, but it comes from a good place. This community is small, and everyone wants this project to succeed. We'll be super normal about this. Hopefully, this will not lead to a fallout between us. Let's begin with a few words about the engine choice. The original Van Buren ran on its own tech with 3D graphics and a rotatable top-down camera. The older engine of Fallout Yesterday isn't quite as colorful, but on the plus side it already includes all the core mechanics: map travel, stealing, aimed shots, the examine feature, and so on. These are important components of classic Fallout gameplay, and because they are baked into the engine, not only does it save development time, but it also helps us minimize the risks of dangerous failure modes. Fallout enthusiasts have a long history of underestimating the importance of gameplay mechanics and instead convincing themselves that the series is actually about clicking on dialogue options or learning platitudes about society. Additionally, the old engine is highly labor efficient. Fallout 2, a massive game, was developed in less than a year. Most fan games are created by small teams, often with a single individual doing the bulk of the work. The efficiency seems tied to the simplicity of creating environments. A building interior in a classic game might only have 6 or 7 objects, whereas the 3D games require far more detailed environments, which increases the workload. Of course, a huge advantage of the first-person Fallouts is that people actually play them. This seems important. The audience for classic games is much smaller. Another downside of the old engine is that very few people know how to work with its scripting system. This is always the bottleneck. It's worth mentioning that Van Buren was supposed to have a dual combat feature, allowing players to choose between real-time combat like in Fallout Tactics or turn-based combat. But the real-time mode was only included due to publishers' demands, and we can ignore these now. The old engine doesn't have this functionality, and you know what? Before diving into character creation, let's meditate on the game's menu art. Fallout games use menu art to show the player something cool and intriguing waiting for them later in the adventure. Since RPGs can be daunting to newcomers, it's important to present an exciting fantasy to draw them in. So this menu art, well, the robot man doesn't do much of anything to me. But this might be a Van Buren problem, not a yesterday problem. We'll come back to this. Mechanically, the game runs the same system as Fallout 2, but with some innovative additions. Addition 1 is Race. You can play as a ghoul or a super mutant. And yes, it actually works. Characters in the game will react to your choice of race. Addition 2 is the significantly expanded selection of traits. Due to UI limitations, we'll have to pick the extra traits after starting the game. Back in the day, the special system that powers Fallout games was one of the most versatile role-play systems available. Back then, many RPGs were based on advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and AD&D didn't have builds in the modern sense. There was no real strategy of character development. So compared to that, Special really stood out. But in the enlightened RPG postmodern neo-Marxism of the current year, the system no longer seems that impressive. Attributes like agility and intelligence are given too much weight, and half of the skills are gimmicks. That said, the system can still work well if you design content to take advantage of it. You do this by regularly incorporating skill and stat checks in conversations and world interactions, and by properly itemizing different weapon types. You know, basic stuff. Unfortunately, the current version of Fallout Yesterday does not do a good job of accommodating varied character designs. You pretty much have to tag outdoorsman and lockpick. I also tagged small guns, naively thinking that small guns of all things would be itemized. The adventure begins inside a computer simulation. We are actually in our cell in the Tibbets prison, but as a tutorial of sorts, the game wants us to play the recreation of the Van Buren tech demo. SimTech is a virtual reality technology mentioned in the Fallout 1 manual and then later explored in the Betrayer's False Fallout 3. There is no mention of SimTech in the Tibbets design document, but the lead for Fallout Yesterday is absolutely obsessed with it, and he keeps jamming SimTech into the game. The Great War has begun. Communist insurgents are taking advantage of the chaos, so stay alert, citizen. Experience and skill points earned in the simulation carry over to real life, but the items do not. As we traverse these streets, stay vigilant for the rats. These commie bastards will stop at nothing to suppress freedom. Eventually, we reach the Vault. In Van Buren, this was Vault 1. In Yesterday, they changed it to Vault 8. Inside, we meet Dr. Moreau. That would be the Master, the Vault Dweller's nemesis from Fallout 1 before he got mutantized. Things to do in the Vault: steal and read skill books, unlock all containers for XP, and finally, kill all Vault Dwellers, because they are not real, but the XP is. We lose karma for killing virtual people, so playing a bad person in a video game does make you bad in real life. Finally, a game brave enough to say this. Kill Richard Moreau too, why not? Without Moreau, there is no Master. Without the Master, there is no Unity. Without the Unity, there is no... me? So, what do I think about the game's opening? The Van Buren tech demo was originally meant to serve as a tutorial in the finished Fallout 3, so its inclusion here makes sense. But it happens to be tedious to play, and even with the fanfiction bits introduced in the mod, it still has no connection to the events of Van Buren. And the monochrome color filter was a terrible idea. The original tech demo is tastefully colorful. This is miserable to look at. I know that the Hwart Serpent did a black and white simulation, but my assumption going into this was that the SAPE entity will not be someone we're gonna emulate. So how do we salvage this? I have two ideas. Idea 1. Delete the irrelevant public domain film currently serving as the intro movie. Delete the Van Buren demo recreation. You have been trying to make it work for years, and it simply doesn't. Instead, make the game's intro in Engine as a series of non-interactive maps with the same monochrome filter. Show the Americans fighting the Chinese, the president being briefed by the Enclave elite, American astronauts on board a space station looking down at the Earth. War never changes. Throw in a couple of barks and don't linger on any of the scenes for more than 5 seconds. Shouldn't be very hard to script. Idea number 2. Locations are characters. It is my opinion that the places we visit in a Fallout game are best understood if you think of them as characters who have character arcs. We find a place, we solve or exacerbate their problems, the place changes, and its story is concluded in the ending slides. With all this in mind, we can use this space to introduce the cast of Van Buren to the player. Salt Lake City, minutes after the bombs fell. People in jumpsuits lining up inside a vault. A nuclear missile base in orbit. The Hoover Dam before the NCR. The Tibbets facility before the Wastelanders. Tibbets is a robot-operated prison, and this is where the adventure truly begins. But do you know what else is a prison? The internet. Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. The internet seems to become more restrictive each year. Personally, I can't even do basic things anymore without a VPN. Things like accessing a banned social media site to commission a picture of a super mutant, apologizing to the developers of Fallout the Frontier, done in the recognizable Christine Chandler style. Some ISPs are known to throttle your download speeds if they see you torrenting. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through a secure encrypted server so that your ISP can't keep tabs on you. We use ExpressVPN to access banned social media and exchange rare screen caps of MovieBob tweets. We are convinced that these will become currency after the apocalypse. ExpressVPN is available on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, smart TVs, and more. It works at blazing fast speeds and was rated #1 by top tech reviewers like The Verge. ExpressVPN lets you change your virtual location to one of the 105 locations around the world. Be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/warlock. Don't forget to use my link at expressvpn.com/warlock to get an extra 4 months of ExpressVPN for free. So, the Van Buren design document describes the prison like this. Tibbets is a cold, sterile, steel-walled automated prison facility run by technology so ancient it dates back to the years before the Great War. We can move freely within the facility, so let me give you a tour. At the heart of the complex is an elevator hub. This is how we access the cell blocks and other areas. As long as you don't cause trouble or attempt to escape, the robots will ignore you. Prisoners have an impressive degree of freedom and interesting privileges. They are provided free food, there is a bar, a barber shop, and a movie theater. The movies appear to be in Spanish. And this is engineering. You need decent lockpicking skills to access this area, which made me think it was intended for later exploration. However, the questlets here seem to be designed for a low-level character, so IDK. People in Tibbets do what they want. Some of them have jobs. Cell blocks seem to function like apartment buildings. Perhaps it's those on the outside who are the real prisoners. So, advanced Falloutry analysis of the Tibbets level. Historically, boomer RPGs had a tendency to screw up the first area. Nobody liked the Temple of Trials in Fallout 2. The Irenicus dungeon, while well made, is 3 times longer than it needs to be. In Chris Avalon's Knights of the Old Republic 2, we spent hours locked inside a sequence of depressing grey trash cans in space. And in Planescape Torment, we explore a dull grey area that's near irrelevant to the plot, populated by boring characters with a philosophy that in the end turns out to be not very important at all. What I'm getting at is that it's crucial to make the first location as engaging as possible, so that the players don't immediately bounce, or worse, flee to the Snake of Discord. So here is my counter-proposal for Tibbets. Embrace the idea that this is a city. The war ended 200 years ago. Some of the prisoners were brought here by the robots from the Wasteland, others were born in Tibbets. This community has been around for a long time. Since the robots aren't overly concerned with exerting absolute control over the human population, many individual selves might have been disassembled by the prisoners and then reassembled into housing. The cell blocks should be merged into 2 or 3 large maps. Since you no longer need to have so many elevators, the boring central area could be transformed into a bazaar where people would trade prison-made goods and alcohol. all. Some vendors would be offering repurposed heavy and energy weapons salvaged from the robots, which would help improve itemization and expand the number of viable character builds. Let's talk about the sprite work. You are looking at a behemoth robot. The sprite is borrowed from Fallout Tactics. It's mentioned in the design document, so its presence here is not fanfiction. Interesting thing about Tactics is that it's the first isometric Fallout game. Classic Fallout is not isometric. One of the developers called this perspective Cavalier Oblique, but it's probably more accurate to call it a version of trimetric. It's fine to not understand the difference, by the way. That's the kind of stuff that's only important for artists and designers, not for normal people. When someone inserts an isometric sprite into a trimetric game, I can usually spot the imposter pretty quickly. But in this case, it seems fine. The perspective mismatch is much less noticeable with complex geometric shapes, like a behemoth. The robot still looks out of place because the colors are all wrong. Despite probably being older than you are, this mod has the aesthetic consistency of a $1 RPG Maker project. This applies to both the sprite work and mapping. Some maps are as good as those in classic games. Others feel moddy, acceptable but not great. And then there are maps that are just outright bad, as if made by someone using the editor for the first time. But this isn't your first time. By now you should be better at this than the original Fallout developers. The artist who makes portraits is very talented. Some of them are on par with the classic games. But then other portraits are just stills from movies and television shows. Previously, I said that the most recent build of the game is no longer trying to physically kill the player. I have lied to make the narrative of the video more dramatic. The mod is still trying to harm you in exotic ways. Quick question: how sensitive are you to noise pollution? The developers added chain rattling sounds to the game's ambience and cranked them up to twice the necessary volume, so the rattling completely overwhelms the location's ambient soundtrack. And the game now has footstep sounds. I didn't mind them in Tibbets, but the sound of footsteps on sand is just grating. And of course, flying creatures like cazadors also have footstep sounds for some reason. Whatever, it will get worse. Our younger brothers and sisters often ask me, the snake of deceitful change, the Nephilim, surely these are just stories. The Sape entity isn't real. Is it? Oh, but it is. It is as real as you and I, and it's trapped in the vault beneath our feet. It all happened centuries ago, back in the tradition times, when people danced around the fire, basically their genitals free from microplastics. Even then, they were living a lie. There is this expectation that CRPGs should be deeply artistic, like the Iliad of video games. This likely stems from the aesthetic of complexity that they have. Look at this UI. It's like a jet fighter cockpit. That's a lot of buttons for a game with like 2 builds, which is still twice as many as in Baldur's Gate. CRPGs were something of a fraud. Still, we should have appreciated what we had, because soon everything would be taken away. The Sape entity had arrived. It was like what David Lynch did to television, but in reverse. In the world of Lynch, it's okay to be challenged. It's okay for some things to be strange. But in the world of Sape, everything that resists immediate comprehension is viewed as flawed by design. But maybe this ain't so bad. You said it yourself, CRPGs were a fraud. Did the world really need more 6 out of 10 strategy games like Icewind Dale? Oh, you like Europa Universalis? Why not try Icewind Dale? This is an example of something nobody ever said. Maybe Crapogers would have never declined if they were good. Shut the f*** up, you little shit. Something is wrong. I can feel someone staring at me. I told you not to look the creature in the eye. You set it free. Do you know how many brothers we have lost trying to contain it, or how many centuries it took? And now it is once again loose in the time stream. This cell block is a copy-pasted version of a level we've already explored twice. The only noticeable difference is this woman showering. Let's go talk to her and admire this game's dialogue writing. Hey brother, I know you, right? We are provided the following dialogue options. Option 1. Not really. Look, I'm here to ask you to leave. Option 2. Yeah, right. Look, if you don't leave and never come back, I'm going to hit you. Option 3. You know, I could try to persuade you to leave. I might even enjoy beating some sense into you, but I think I'd rather end your miserable existence. Option 4. Yeah, hi. Look, I have to go. We have never seen this woman before, and she hasn't done anything odd or antisocial. Whoa, stop it! I'll scream! You just don't get it, do you? You take a step forward. Oh, please go away. I am going to hurt you unless you leave. TLDR, the woman cries and runs away while our character keeps making threats. This is the first time in a Fallout game we are made to participate in a domestic violence episode. No additional context is provided. Admittedly, the sequence is extra deranged even for this mod. The problem with writing in Fallout yesterday is that very few characters or lines of dialogue manage to stand out, and when they do, it's for the wrong reasons. A shame, considering half of the game revolves around chasing escaped locals across the Wasteland. Tibbets is meant to introduce you to these characters, yet you likely won't remember any of them. So how do we escape? Well, there are two ways. Method 1. Do nothing for a few days and wait for mysterious paramilitaries to eventually storm the prison. They are only hostile to the robots, so when the invasion happens, you can climb the rope to freedom. Method 2. Talk to this guy. He'll give you an explosive. You use the explosive on the computer near the turbine. Nothing actually explodes, but for some reason this action prematurely triggers the invasion mentioned in Method 1. The unknown paramilitaries are using Fallout the Frontier tech. Remember when nerds mocked the Frontier for its aesthetic inconsistencies? That game wasn't even close to being as bad as this. The Frontier features a huge world map and 3 main quests, one more insane than the other. Fallout yesterday has a total of 0 finished locations. When the Frontier is speaking, you listen and learn. The first thing you notice after hitting the world map is that the game doesn't have a strong travel theme. Based on what I've read on the forums, one of the developers' obsessions is that traveling must take a long time and that the wasteland must feel desolate. So we'll be spending a lot of time looking at the screen. Most individuals would probably agree that traveling in the first-person Fallouts is more immersive. Real life is first-person. However, unless you are CD Projekt or Rockstar, first-person RPGs tend to have smaller worlds. And once you start noticing just how tiny the game world actually is, it can be hard to maintain the suspension of disbelief. Classic map travel is much better at communicating the sense of space and the passage of time. Traveling from one location to another can take weeks, and a lot of things can happen on the way. Here is a trading caravan. This guy heard about our evil behavior in Simtech, so he's refusing to trade with us. Thanks for providing reactivity for my choices. You might encounter robots that will try to arrest you and escort you back to Tibbets, but then nothing stops the player from leaving again. Brotherhood of Steel encounters are frequent around the prison. Thankfully, the knights are often encountered fighting someone else, giving us time to escape. Cazadors aren't very strong against power armor, but Gauss rounds sure are. While the knights are distracted with mutant insects, I run to the body and grab a plasma pistol. This was the first proper weapon I managed to obtain. I approve of the fact that you can do this early. The world map in the mod seems to be the biggest source of player complaints. Traveling takes way too long, and the frequent encounters make high outdoorsman skill a necessity. Personally, I'm not opposed to the idea of making map travel play a bigger role, but I doubt it's authentic to the Van Buren vision, and it needs a lot of work before it's good. Turn-based games don't do swarm encounters well, so please stop adding them. Adjust the encounter maps so that players start closer to the escape grid. Consider using the special encounter feature to introduce genuinely interesting areas, rather than doing jokes or references. This mod has so many tonal problems, it really should avoid trying to be funny. Fort Abandon is the closest location to the Tibbets prison, so it'll likely be one of the first areas you visit. An NCR settlement sacked by Caesar's Legion. Pretty sure some of these cows are isometric. Let's talk about the Legion. The narrative of Fort Abandon sets up a battle between a Legion raiding party and an invisible Deathclaw, with the player opportunistically aiding whichever side is losing. The Legion in Van Buren is not quite the same organization as in Vegas. This version of the Legion is motorized. They don't appear to hate technology. An average Legionnaire is better equipped than an average Wastelander. The overall Roman LARP aesthetic seems to be subdued. The Van Buren Caesar is also very different. Are very different. There have been many Caesars. When a new Caesar takes power, all the records of the previous Caesar are destroyed. In this version of the universe, the Battle of Hoover Dam did occur, but the outcome was decided by the NCR counterattack on the Legion camp, setting the slavers back years. In the previous versions of Fallout Yesterday, the Legionnaires were depicted as armored tribal sprites. These are some of the best fan-made sprites for the classic engine. However, in one of the recent releases, the developers added a new type of Legionnaire, inspired by the Vegas aesthetic, which deviates significantly from the original Fallout Yesterday design. So, which version of the Legion are we going for? Honestly, I don't mind seeing Vegas ideas in Van Buren. All I ask for is consistency. This battle is the best content Fallout Yesterday has to offer. In the previous versions of the mod, the Deathclaw would always win, but now it seems the Legionnaires have the upper hand. The slavers were never meant to have a major role in the original Fallout 3. They were intended to be more prominent in Black Isle's Fallout 4, which was, of course, never made. You might have noticed New Vegas oddly downplays the importance of the Hoover Dam as a power source, instead emphasizing the city of Vegas as the landmark driving the conflict. In Van Buren, the dam is important because it can power the Wasteland. By the time the prisoner arrives, it's one of the biggest settlements in the NCR, and also one of the few urban communities in Van Buren. Urban might not be the right word, but you know what I mean. Those of you who played Vegas, which is all of you, might recall that game having a plot element about Brahmin oligarchs. Supposedly they have a lot of power in the NCR, and they use it to do all sorts of bad things. The person who told me this had an honest face, so I trust his account. In Van Buren, the NCR capitalists are an important part of the plot, but it's not about Brahmin barons. Instead, it's about caravan companies. I like this version of the Hoover Dam a lot. It's much more interesting than what we saw in the first-person game. The upper part of the dam, known as the Rim, houses shops, government buildings, and company offices. It's also where the more affluent residents live. Do you visit the Cloud District very often? The Rim extends all the way to here. And here they have a formidable wall with high-powered gun turrets that have already thwarted Caesar's invasion plans once. This is an elevator that leads to the downtown, which is where the poor people live and where the dungeons are. I expected the mapping to get better after Tibbets. The more you work on the game, the better you become at working on the game. But no, every new place we visit is the new worst map I've ever seen. In the design document, the shops are placed on the dam itself, but this clearly doesn't work. The Black Isle designers underestimated how narrow the body of the dam actually is. There is no room. You need to change it either to open-air merchant stalls or redesign the dam to resemble a European bridge town. This is the NCR military barracks in the Rim, but what it actually is the Hebologist HQ map from Fallout 2. Again, an awful map that they copy-pasted and then changed some things while still maintaining the recognizable shape. I'm trying to understand the creative mind behind Fallout yesterday, but I can't. It's a concert of bad ideas. Recycling maps from another game is not exactly great for suspension of disbelief. And you can't even argue that copying maps from vanilla saves time, because the developers seem to have changed most of the tiles, and this is something you do by hand. And they seem to have used the exterior tile set that wasn't meant for dungeons. Why? But you know what? I said we're gonna be normal about this, and I will take my own advice. What can be improved about the mapping? Number 1. Reduce empty space. In a walled settlement, real estate should be in demand. Number 2. Adjust object density. Too many items on screen clutter the view and make the location hard to read. Number 3. I hate goddamn doors. There are too many, and waiting for each door's animation to play makes navigation frustrating. Number 4. The visual style should be unified. Stop mixing different tile sets, styles, and color schemes. These are diesel punk sprites from the Olympus mod. They don't work with the classic tiles. They're too different. To learn mapping, I highly recommend checking out 13V by the Polish community contributor Lich. It's an adventure game on the classic Fallout engine, and you should steal basically every single one of its ideas. So, it's unfortunate that they botched the Hoover Dam in Fallout yesterday, because it's the most interesting and complex community in the game. About half of locations in Van Buren are post-apocalyptic gimmicks with populations in low dozens. This is Avalon's game, and his formula is take the first third of Fallout 1, add the first hour of Fallout 2, scale it up and throw in an evil wizard plotting to destroy the world. The Blackfoot tribe is a community of primitives who make slave raids. The matriarchal Twin Mothers is one of many tribes in the Fallout world, a raider clan known as the Hounds of Hecate, formerly the Vipers. Mesa Verde is the home of the Ciphers, aka the Painted People, thanks to their extensive use of body paint. Comprised of 24 raiders, the Rusty Hooks came upon the remnants of the Bloomfield Space Center. Does anything on this list excite you? Let's talk about the main quest. The antagonist of Van Buren is the mad scientist named Victor Presper, described as an endgame level threat on par with the Master from Fallout 1. He's the smartest man on Earth, except possibly for the protagonist. But not this protagonist, certainly. Presper was born in Shady Sands before the founding of the Republic.
President of NCR.
He spent many years as a scientific advisor to President Tandy. That was before his disillusionment settled in.
Is to cleanse the mutants from the globe.
A disillusionment fueled by the caravan houses that ate away at NCR. Radicalized Presper became determined to find a way to rid the world of chaos and human impurities. Eventually, he learned of Limit 115, a pre-war disease also known as the New Plague. You know, I remember reading discussions about this game's story on No Mutants Allowed about 20 years ago or so, and getting the impression that the plague was Presper's intended tool for cleansing the world. But that doesn't seem to be the case, and I suppose Fallout 2 already told this story. So what happens is that Presper eventually discovers a pre-war weapon, a ballistic satellite known as Bomb 001. The ultimate weapon, a space station that can house up to 24 nuclear missiles, a dormant artifact of a paranoid age long past. The limitation is that one has to physically be on the space station to take control of the nukes. So Presper infects himself, a bunch of his followers, and some random Wastelanders with the plague. This is enough to spur the machines in Tibbets into action. The mad scientist and his posse get arrested by the robots, just as planned. You see, Tibbets is a quarantine prison. One of its functions is to keep the infected isolated from the outside world. Prison food contains special medicine that suppresses the symptoms of the plague. Remember this guy at the gym? He is one of Victor Presper's lieutenants. The rest of his men would stage an attack on the prison, which would allow everyone to escape. The prison break would set in motion the ancient failsafe. The AI at Tibbets would seek to recover as many escaped prisoners as possible. This is what we do in the first half of the game. We search the wastes for escaped convicts and dox them to the Tibbets AI. Once 90% of the prisoners have been retrieved, the computer intelligence will command the weapon in orbit to come to life and launch nuclear missiles to clean and prevent any further infection. By the time this happened, Presper had planned to be on board the space station, taking control of the weapon of mass destruction. Humans of his choosing would wait out the second nuclear apocalypse in the Boulder Dome until the day came where he declared the Earth safe for pure-blood humans once more. The second half of the game is about repairing a spaceship and then confronting the mad scientist and his ex-NCR elite guard on the space station. So, what do I like about Van Buren's plot? I like that the game cleverly introduces some of the villains as early as Tibbets. I like the novelty of a space adventure. I appreciate that the game begins in the middle of the world map with no obvious optimal order for visiting locations. I like how convoluted and multi-stage Presper's plan is. He is described as a mad scientist and he acts like one. And the biggest problem with Van Buren's plot is that there is no ethical conflict. Victor Presper is an evil wizard from the Forgotten Realms. He wants to destroy his enemies using ancient magic. He is stupid and believes in nothing. Presper is similar to Father Elijah from Vegas. Even the visual design is alike. But Elijah had a real reason to hate the NCR. He lost a war with them.
A chance to begin again.
However, the weakest part of the plot is the satellite. It only holds 12 missiles. How do you expect to cause a second apocalypse with just 12 nukes? A master-level villain? I don't think so. This is not even a Colonel Autumn-level villain. The Fallout Yesterday menu art shows someone resembling a Wolfenstein stormtrooper. That's not very Fallout-like, but I can't bring myself to criticize it since the script didn't offer anything more interesting than this. So, how do we fix the mad scientist and truly make him into a master-level threat he's described to be? I have some ideas. Solution 1. We smartwash Presper by reinterpreting his plan. It's not about impurities or the second apocalypse. The nuclear weapon in orbit is leverage he will use to control the nations of the world. The NCR and others will have to accept Presper as their ruler, or they'll get nuked. Solution 2. A comedy option. Make him a Maoist. The game begins with us fighting communist guerrillas during the final hours of the Great War. We can even find Mao's Red Book. So Presper got red-pilled, and now he hates capitalism so much, he is absolutely willing to eradicate all traces of it with nuclear fire. He should have a network of followers and sleeper agents in various settlements in the Wasteland. His NCR guards should be replaced with Neo-Black Panthers. A Black Panther power armor on the menu screen. I suppose some might say that the weakness of this approach is that Chris Avellone doesn't seem to like including political theory bits in Fallout, so he probably wouldn't have written something like this. Solution 3. Just roll with it. The game is Black Isle's Van Buren. If Victor Presper's plan doesn't make sense, then that's just how it is. The good news is that it's possible to execute a bad idea so well that it will work despite itself. The gangster city of New Reno. It might be the dumbest concept in the series, and yet it stands out as one of the best locations in the game. Good craftsmanship can make even the most stupid gimmick endearing. Solution 4. You know what? Enough with this charade. Turn Van Buren into the trimetric New Vegas 2, with its events unfolding concurrently with the Courier's adventures. If the Van Buren lore contradicts Vegas lore, then the latter takes precedence. This way, we can avoid the problem of Presper's weak motivation and lack of moral complexity by borrowing both of these things from the first-person game. Presper is dark woke liberal Al-Qaeda. He calculated that at the current rate of growth, the Legion ranks will swell to such an extent that the NCR won't be able to hold the Dam or even California in 8 years. So a group of NCR congressmen approves a black op behind Legion lines, the so-called Tibbets plan. Presper takes control of the space station and uses nuclear weapons to destroy major Legion population centers. The moral dilemma is that most of his victims are civilians. Presper insists that these extreme actions are necessary to protect the Republic's existence. Some individuals in the community feel that New Vegas didn't go far enough in showing the flaws of the NCR system or the supposed strengths of Caesar's state, so it makes sense to address this in the sequel. War never changes. I'm gonna be real with you folks. Almost everything about Fallout yesterday is not great. But it's not the end of the world. The classic engine is labor efficient, so even if the current content is rough, what matters is that the developers are improving their technique, with the community pushing them in the right direction. The direction opposite of whatever that was with the woman showering scene. If you master the Fallout technique, scripting, mapping, writing, you can create a full-sized Fallout game surprisingly fast. Fallout 2 was built in under a year, and most fan games seem to take between 3 and 4 years, and at least 2 of them were primarily developed by a single person. Fallout yesterday is one of the very few major classic Fallout projects still in development, the other big one being Mutants Rising, also a direct Fallout 2 sequel. Mutants Rising appears to be progressing well. I hope in the future we'll see more projects like these, but this is 2025. These might be the final years of the scene. All the more reason to hope Fallout yesterday succeeds. If Van Buren isn't remade, the hole in reality will remain unpatched, and our genitals will keep getting contaminated with microplastics. Todd Hwart, known as the Great Serpent of Discord to the Comanches and the Snake of Deceitful Change to the Dawn Host, is not a person, but an entity born from the sins of the Krapogur Court, now roams free in the time stream. This video features music by the artist Nobody's Nail Machine from the Fallout Sonora soundtrack, along with segments from the Incline trailer by Felipe Pepe. Next is a book episode. We will study the career of 2 individuals who were trying to make a first-person Soviet Fallout 3, but then they got real horny and invented racism instead.